voice in your head, you'll escape, changing what you need to make sense of it. That's what's in. Hello, all you amazing people, and welcome again to another episode of Figurisms. I am your host, Grant Trimble, and in this show, I talk to all kinds of creatives, such as models, photographers, painters, etc., that utilize nudity in their work. The purpose of this is to try and understand with greater depth the message, meaning, and choices behind the people traveling this path to foster a greater comprehension of the use of nudity in the arts. These topics personally interest me as I myself fall into this category, but the motivations behind why people are drawn to this can be very wide-ranging. They usually begin at a deeply personal level, but can also give rise to bigger statements meant to address the public as a whole. My hope is to alleviate some of the stigmas surrounding this endeavor, as well as try and add some context to the greater cultural dialogue regarding sexuality. My guest in this episode is Maria, aka Ofelia, aka Reina de Aguacate. I hope I pronounced that correctly, but if you are ever wanting to know who the queen of the avocados is, now you do. Maria is currently living in Berlin, but we first met actually in Ecuador, where she modeled for me. We talk a little bit about this, but branch out into a wide range of topics that include her creative exploits, her struggle with feeling isolated. You'll see this actually comes from a variety of circumstances, how she openly handles insecurity, the energy to keep going, and the role motherhood plays in this, as well as the desire to leave something behind. One of the things I really appreciate about Maria is how candid and open she is, even when making observations that go against the grain of popular perspectives. At one point in the interview, we do run into a little bit of issues with the sound quality, just to give you a heads up with that. But in my opinion, this does very little to take away from what is actually being shared. As this is a long-form interview, my suggestion, as it was in the last episode, is to sit back, relax, and let what Maria has to say sink in. One of the first things that I wanted to touch on was how we actually met, which I think is an interesting story.
Yeah.
Did you want to go ahead and talk about that?
Yeah, for sure. Well, we met in a very, I would say, very special time in my life because I was kind of at the peak of this experimentation, doing some photo shoots involving nudity. I mean, I had already done it like 3 or 4 years before I met you a few times. But at the same time, it wasn't completely, how can I say, I wasn't sure what I was doing or why I was doing it. It was just as a form of experimentation for me because I like to try new things. I like to explore. And so it started basically as that. And then the more I was doing it, the more I was realizing that there was a very personal search in what I was doing. And I started to question myself, why am I doing this? And I think, of course, the reasons why have been evolving through time and been evolving through the shoots that I've had. And I think with you specifically, it came to a turning point because I think the way we handled it was very different than what I was used to. So I was very used to, someone contact me and, okay, let's make pictures. So we would meet up and instantly just start doing pictures, that's what you came for, that's what you do. And then thank you, goodbye, and then we leave. So it wasn't much of it didn't become so personal.
Yeah.
But definitely with you, it was interesting because we actually took the time to have a good conversation. We actually took the time to kind of, get to know each other, understand each other a little bit, like our background, the reasons why we're doing this. Just talk as if we were friends, as if we known each other for a long time. So that was actually interesting because I could feel the difference, the difference of working when it's not in such a personal manner, and with working when it becomes almost like how do you say, like you have a connection with someone. So I did feel that everything becomes a little bit more real. You know, you're not so much thinking about, oh, what's the other person's reaction going to be if I do this or if I try this.
Yeah, there was a
Um,
connection kind of on a deeper level where
yes,
we
yes,
really connected personally, and we're able to tell even our stories and backgrounds. And I think one of the interesting parts of all of it as well is the backdrop of all of this happened in Ecuador, which is where we were
yeah,
living, and
yeah.
we connected, which is kind of, it's a funny story even to me, but we connected through a friend of mine. His name's Edwin. He's the editor in chief for Soda Pop. You know, I mentioned that I hadn't shot in a while, and he said, "Let me find a model for you." And he was actually living in Tokyo at the time,
Mm,
which is funny to me because here he was living in Tokyo, I was living in Ecuador, and he found a model for me to shoot through. I assume he contacted you through Instagram. Is that how he found you?
yeah, yeah, through Instagram.
Yeah. So it always is kind of funny of me. It's funny to me thinking about that and kind of the how we ended up connecting through someone that was living in Tokyo. That's always kind of a
Yeah.
funny. That's always kind of a funny little fact for me. But we met at your apartment. I think that right there is even a big sign of trust and a big show of trust to anyone that kind of allows you into their home. Especially, it can be a vulnerable situation, both physically and
Yeah,
emotionally. But I right away, I just
yeah,
remember we connected, like we had kind of been
yeah,
friends.
yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, completely. For me, it was. You know, I actually think we even talked about this that day. That it's very rare that you have such a connection with someone that you just meet. You know,
Yeah.
it's very rare that people are completely sincere, not only with you but with themselves about you know how they're presenting themselves. And I think with you and I, it was always very true. It was always very sincere. We even talked about some, you know, some issues that we've had, some similarities, some hard times that we've gone through that was kind of similar in a way. So I also think we connected through there, which was very important because I was at a point in my life that I was dealing a lot with, you know, things such as depression and anxiety attacks and feeling very lonely. So it was also interesting how the conversation evolved to that. And then also how in the pictures, because I, you know, like looking through all the photos that we have made, because we made a lot of pictures. It wasn't that only that one time.
Yeah, we just shot that one day, and it's almost like we
Mm,
had multiple shoots within that day, but we were able to spend a lot of time together, which I personally really loved, because
yeah,
that's not something that I even get to do as a photographer, is spend a lot of time with the person that you work with, if it's, especially if it's someone that you just met. So it was kind of a really special moment to be able to meet you and connect with you on such a deep level and create something that was both was meaningful to both of us, and that is kind of a very rare thing.
yeah, 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 exactly. I agree. I think, well, I think we're both similar maybe in that way that we are, you know, that we trust. I mean, when we are very, how do you say, we guide ourselves a lot by energy and how it feels, you know. So for us it was okay, so we meet each other, it felt really nice. We felt like we were in a familiar place, so that allowed us to really open ourselves up. And you can see the evolution, you know, through the pictures. From the first picture you took to the last, you can see how it evolved and how it changed, and how each different session that was made in the house has a different tone to it and like a different feeling. And it's very nice. Very, I don't know. I had never done something like that in my life.
And recently you've been posting pictures on your Instagram from that shoot. It was
Yeah.
there was there is there a reason why you decided to post some of those photos? Was it because you knew that you're going to be interviewing and you kind of went back and were reflecting, or what was the motivation behind that?
No, actually, it was just a feeling. Lately, I've been going through my disc and kind of organizing all the shoots that I have made so far. And then I started looking at our shoot, and then I realized, like, oh, hey, I have so many good pictures here, and like important pictures that say a lot, you know, that I would like other people to see. So I just started posting them on Instagram.
That shoot, I revisit quite a bit because there is something in the feel that is representative of something that I'm trying to do, I think, through all of my work. And I think that a lot of it comes down to there being a connection, just kind of a real genuine connection and a friendship there. And that's something that I really appreciate. I wanted to jump, though, to where you are now. You're currently living in Berlin. And when I first met you, you were single living in Ecuador. Now you're married with a child. And that's a pretty dramatic change there, which is a kind of a whole story in and of itself. But you've recently done some work, and it was with a group or with an artist. What was the situation there?
Oh, yes. This was with a group of Russian artists, actually. It was a workshop that they were conducting here in Berlin. I saw it sponsored on Instagram. I found it very interesting what it was about. The title is Sex mit Dingen, which means sex with things. And basically, this workshop was treating about how nowadays, with so much technology that we have in our hands, like everything is a screen, everything is it goes down to the cell phone, to the computer, to the internet. We have so many outlets to communicate that we are missing real touch with people. We're kind of like becoming little machines.
Virtual.
Yeah, we're kind of becoming little machines along with our machines, and it becomes like this very strange evolution in how people, how they connect with each other. So now you see a lot of, there's like porn everywhere. There's like Skype, like you can have sex with someone through the webcam or through the phone or through sexting. So like you use all the time like these outlets as a way of connecting with the other people, but it's not so real anymore, So it kind of has to do with that, how it has evolved to this, and how people kind of, how they behave around these objects that connect them supposedly to another human being.
What appealed to you particularly about that project?
I guess to me, it really called my attention because nowadays I feel, not all of the time, but most of the time, I feel very isolated. Since I've been dealing a lot with my maternity and becoming a new mom and having a little baby, and also, being recently new to the city. It's not that I know many people, and it's also that I kind of felt the need to be in my own personal space. I feel that I have been dealing with a lot of things, and sometimes it's quite a lot to handle. So I like to isolate myself. I also do it on purpose, and I have found that it's been very interesting how my relationships have pretty much reduced to a screen, because I talk to a lot of people actually, but mostly people that are in Ecuador. So like my mom, my best friend, like family and friends, and I'm usually on the cell phone and like sending voice notes or through video chat. And for me, it was like, okay, it's not really that. It doesn't really have to do with sex, but of course, it has to do with how my relationships have changed and reduced to a screen, which is in a way, kind of what this is about.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why it called my attention, and it was very fun. It was a very fun workshop. I feel that we did a lot of experimentation, and I met a lot of new open-minded people, which is also always very nice. And I also feel now, as a mother, my personal view, my artist view, my individual view has changed. A lot of things have changed. My priorities have changed. My body has changed. Like it's just completely, everything has turned around for me. So I feel like I am relearning everything that I already thought that I learned, just because I kind of want to start going in a different direction.
So these changes, I would assume, are both good and bad changes, and kind of a mixture between. A mixture of those?
I mean, more than good or bad, I would say, happy and sad. soft and also very hard, you know, like there's things that have been pretty, you know, like maybe I wouldn't say easy, but simple. And there's other things that are still up till now very complicated and very complex, and I am trying to understand it.
So, what is the role of nudity then in your art and all of this? What is its importance, and why did you choose to use it?
Well, for me, I have always been very open-minded about nudity. I actually really do not understand, you know, most of people's point of view about that. It doesn't come natural to me to see it as a dirty thing, you know. I think it's like the most natural form of being. You know, we are born naked, and also I don't understand this shame with your own body. I have no idea how that can be a positive thing. You know, I think that everyone should be proud of their body, and it doesn't matter what it looks like, but more because of what it does, because it's your vessel. You know, it's you, and it's the purest form of yourself. You know, being naked is like being completely vulnerable. You know, no clothes hiding anything, just yourself. And I just find it so very real and so very rich that I've liked to explore it also in a sense that to understand why people always have to look at the body in such a sexual, perverse way, you know, and I think that it's just so much more than that.
Did do you remember at what point you saw a contrast between the way that you thought and the way that other people thought? Did you always have an openness as in regards to your body and sexuality and nudity?
Yeah, I always had, and
Was it
I
something
even had.
that your parents did they teach you that, or were they completely different? Was this something you learned on your own?
It was something that I learned on my own because my family is very Christian, very religious, and they have a lot of very strong points of view about that. And I think I also did it as a form of liberation, you know, because all the time as a little girl, I was told, like, oh, you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that. And, you know, if you're a girl, you should look like this and not be sitting like this. Like all these times putting like so many rules and so many limitations just because I'm a girl. And I didn't like that at all, you know, at all. So for me, it was like a way of breaking away from all of those no's and all of those prohibitions and trying to understand, you know, why. Yeah, more than no, okay. So no, why not? You know, like I was always as a little girl, I was always a person that would question everything until now, you know. Until now I'm always like why, because I always think it's important to ask why. I think we're very used to people telling us what to do, and we just say okay, and that's it, and you don't question it, and that's like the main that's how you evolve in life, that's how you grow, you know, you have to question it all. So for me it was more of a question to all of these no's that I got all the time, and it was more of a search that I did on my own.
When you said you always question why, and it seems that there's a lack of people wanting to ask why. They kind of accept the statements that they're given and told to do. Do you, I'm trying to think of the best way to say this. Do you remember, I guess, a time when you you realized you saw nudity and sexuality different than others?
I mean,
Like, is there an example growing up that kind of is a reference point for yourself where
I mean,
something
yeah.
stuck out?
In school, for example, I would always be. I mean, I was always quite popular because I would never go. I was never a follower. You know, I was always a leader. So it would always be that I was very popular, but I was also at the same time very criticized and insulted. Like I would get called a slut or a whore or a bitch or, you know, like all these very sexist. Um, how do you call it? These sexist?
The
Yeah,
derogatory
insults.
insults, yeah.
Yeah. So I would always have to deal with that, and it's something that caused a lot of questioning in myself and a lot of hard times and a lot of vulnerability and a lot of sadness. I would feel like, why are these people rejecting me? Why do they pretend like they want to be my friends, but at the same time, when I turn around, they're like talking all this shit about me, and even with what reason? Like what's the reasoning behind all this bullying? And I could never quite grasp it, actually, until I was, of course, more mature and more adult. Um, and so from that point, I started to question, maybe there is something that I do different that makes them feel this way about me. But it's not necessarily that it's me that is wrong, Most likely it's them. That's what I was thinking at that time. It's most likely them, but how do I find out? So that's when I started kind of exploring also with my sexual side. Like I lost my virginity when I was 15. So it's not like super early, but it's also not so late. It's just kind of like I was a kid still, and I started also exploring about my sexual preferences. Like is it really that I want to be with men, or is it that I want to be with women, or is it that I want to be with both? Like I just started looking into it to kind of understand, why are people criticizing me so much, and is what I'm doing really wrong, or is it just a natural thing that is looked upon like so many others in society?
I mean, you know better than I do, but this is all taking place in a very conservative environment, more so, I would say, than the United States. And in the United States, we deal with our fair share of this kind of shaming and stuff like this. But I think it's important that people understand it's probably a bit elevated where you came from. Is that a fair assessment? Do you think that's accurate, or?
No, yeah, of course, I do think it's accurate. I mean, in the States, I also had my share of bullying and shaming, but I think mostly because I was in a Christian school. So, of course, the people that surrounded me were very strong on their dogmas, and felt the need to criticize and judge. But mostly, yes, it was worse in Quito. And I mean, in the coast, maybe the people are a bit more happy, a bit more charismatic, a bit more outgoing, not so close-minded when it comes to clothing, because of course it's super hot there and you have the beach, and like there's a little bit more of it's more relaxing in that subject there, but it's still really, really conservative, and they're still very hypocritical, and it's still a very, very religious, also very religious place, the coast,
How
in
much
general.
how much time did you spend in the U.S.? Yeah, weren't you around 8? You spent. I'm from my memory, it's like about 5 years. Is that
I was about 3 to 4 years.
okay? 3 to 4 years, and what were those ages?
I was from 12 till almost turning 16.
Okay, so that's one
So
of the reasons why your English is so good. But
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, I'm very American.
I couldn't quite remember how old you were at that time, just to give a reference point there. But yeah,
Yeah,
you were saying though Ecuador is very conservative, even if it's on the
Ecuador is
coast or
worse,
not.
10 times, 10 times worse. Yes, Ecuador is really something that worries me, saddens me a lot. I always felt very out of place there. Always. I had a very strong desire to leave for a very long time, because I always felt so out of place, and so misunderstood. And I can say actually that for the first time here in Berlin, I have felt a lot of liberation on that subject, a lot of what I knew that I could feel at one point if I left. And now that I am living it here, it's really it's a relief. It's really a relief.
What are some of the big contrasts then for you between Ecuador and Berlin?
Well, first of all, I find that most of the people I have met here are very genuine. People are very genuine, very not, they're not afraid to be themselves. You see a lot of crazy shit all the time, and a lot of people just, I've seen very unique unique people. And this creates, of course, a place that is very full of, how do you say, like a lot of freedom. You go to the lake, and for example, you see people bathing naked in front of strangers. You go to the pool, you also see naked people. Like they're very much free with their sexuality and their bodies. And also here there's a lot of sex clubs, and here it's like very much a very freed up place in that sense, and all of this sexuality and body wise, and
But what is it
it's
about that appeals to you?
well, first because it's something that I never experienced before in my life. It's like very much, yeah, you do feel a lot of liberation, and I do think that's why a lot of people want to be here, and I also think that's why this place has become such a hip place to be, because there's also a lot of artists. It's like a huge art scene, and therefore there's a lot of open-minded people. And yeah, honestly, I had never been shamed upon because of how I dress or how I look or the pictures that I make or my sexual preference, or I have never been shamed here because of that. And that just gives me a sense of warmth, a sense of home that I had never felt before.
We're talking about your modeling, but you also create in other respects. Can you tell us a little bit about what else you do? Because I know something that's very important to you actually is dancing. That's a way that
Yeah.
you express yourself, and that's something that you have a deep connection to. Are you able to tell us a little bit kind of about your background, your creative backgrounds in other respects other than just your modeling?
Yeah, for sure. Well, ever since I was little, I explored a lot of different dancing techniques. So I did some ballet for some years. I did some hip hop dancing. I did some gymnastics. Like I explore a little bit of movement in general. I also explored in theater and contemporary dance. Once I was in the university, I studied film, which I really like because I see myself as a very visual artist. My memory is quite visual also, so kind of went that way. Also exploring with photography for quite some time now. I also like to write. I'm very I multitask a lot when it comes to art because I feel kind of lost right now. I feel that I like all these different things, and I like to do different things in order to understand myself better and to develop in a creative way. And dancing, of course, is something that has always been there because ever since I was little, my mom has showed me videos of myself dancing like crazy to the music. And my mom was always showing me like these amazing songs and bands that up to today I still love and remember. And so I was always very musical. And dancing became like a very much a part of me, actually, once I started experimenting in the right way. Because as I told you before, I did ballet and like some hip hop and contemporary dance. And of course, this in a way has, parameters and limitations. And I mean, it's fun. It's a great way to discipline yourself also and to get to know it. But for me, it was also like, okay, I want to feel a little bit more freedom when I'm dancing, because for me, dancing is is the very fact that you can just move your body however you want it and have a true deep connection with the music that you're feeling and that you're listening to. And it becomes like this very unique way of expression for me. That's how I see it. And very much also like a sense of liberation. So when I dance, I don't like to put thought into it. I just like to go along with what I'm feeling. And I do feel that I've explored quite a bit of that, and I love it.
Now, you mentioned expression. Where does the nudity fit into this expression? I guess what if you were trying to make a statement with your work, what does that statement sound like or look like?
I think, I think it's very much a statement of self-empowerment. I feel that the body has become very much this kind of like a political subject, especially towards women, like all these parameters that they want to put, like all these all this bullshit, really, because it's bullshit, like the body of a woman has to be this way or that way in order to be a nice or a beautiful body, and if it's not like that, then they make you feel very insecure. And I believe that a lot of the emotional baggage that women carry, and maybe not even women, maybe all of us carry nowadays, is because of all these pressures of looking perfect and having the perfect body. And if you don't have it, then there comes this feeling of, oh, you should be ashamed, or you should not feel like you're worthy enough or beautiful enough. And I just think that it's a load of shit. And I like any other person, have a lot of insecurities about myself. I am very insecure in a lot of things. And for me, the way to handle this insecurity is to show it. Instead of to cover it up, I want to show it, because that's the way that I am being honest, not only with myself, but with the rest of the people. I feel that we tend to hide the things that we are insecure about,
Face it head on.
Yeah, we tend to make it look like it's something else. And I think that's lying to yourself. And I think that's never going to get you anywhere, but to feel even more ashamed. And you're never going to get over this insecurity that is probably going to fuck you up the rest of your life. I think that there has to come a point in which you have to evolve, and this has to change. And for me, that's what I try to express, self-empowerment through the body, and like saying, hey, it's okay. I may not look like a supermodel. I may not have like all the qualities that make my body perfect, but this is my body and I love it and I am not ashamed of it. And I think no one should be. So I actually didn't realize that I was doing this until I started getting a bunch of messages from different people all the time. Like, hey, I really love your work. It makes me feel that I can be open about my body and the way I look, and I can be sincere with myself and with others, and finding nudity as this beautiful thing, as this, as a part of ourselves, and instead of shaming on it and putting all these negative thoughts to it. And that's when I realized, okay, I really do think that I'm doing something valuable here, because I do feel sometimes that Instagram, social media in general, can kind of deform in a way what you're trying to say or what you're doing, or even sometimes, become like this very fake thing. And so seeing that I have a little bit of influence in it, I was saying to myself always, like, I want to generate some content that people will see and feel something from it and think something from it, and not just selfies or what I had to eat, but just really things that will make other people think and feel, even if they feel like, I hate this, what is this girl posting pictures of herself naked, like, who does she think she is, like, I have also created a lot of hate and a lot of judgment, and people that have written to me also in a very negative sense. And but I actually do feel that even that is important, because even if they hate it and if they criticize it, they are taking the time to think about it and to rationalize it in a way, and to even, contact me about it and say something. And so for me, that's important. That's very, very important.
Yeah, there's a lot of information in there that I know I'm going to enjoy personally going back over and listening to, because that was I think a lot of things that people don't, like you said, trying to instigate something and make people think about it. And it goes back to what you were saying earlier, as to most people don't think why sort of things are the way they are. They just kind of respond and drudge along, reacting to how they think that they should be, as opposed to really questioning why something is the way that it is. And the fact that you have dealt, I know we've talked about this before, but you have dealt with a lot of people, total strangers writing to you. And I think a lot of other people who kind of entered into this same kind of work, especially women, not so much men, but I think especially women, they get this kind of negative reaction, and people feel that it's okay to say incredibly horrible things to them and shame them, kind of almost into submission is really the end goal, you know. And I think people leverage shame quite a bit, and it's unhealthy, I think, in all respects. But I think making that statement is very important to me, and obviously it is to you as well.
Completely.
One of the things I think about, though, you know, we're talking a lot about nudity, and nudity is part of our sexuality. What does sexuality mean to you other than just simply the act of having sex? Because and I'll kind of give you sort of maybe the way that I see it. I'll try to be brief here, but the way that I see sexuality is a way in which we interact with kind of everybody. And I think that may sound bizarre to a lot of people, because when people think of sexuality, they just think of the act of sex, or essentially trying to have sex with somebody. But I really see personally that all our relationships, there is a dynamic of sexuality involved. And I'm saying this in not any kind of perverse way. I'm kind of thinking very broad about it. What are your thoughts on that, on sexuality and stuff?
I completely agree with everything you just said right now. For me, sexuality is much more than the sexual act. Completely is this the way we interact with ourselves, the way we interact with the world, the way we interact with others, the way we see things. I mean, I have always considered myself a very sexual person, and not because, you know, you could say I'm obsessed with sex, or because everything to me is sex, but more because I feel that everything is related to, you know, to sex. And I feel that sex is also the way that we connect with others.
Well, even one of the first things you establish whenever you meet someone is kind of, where do you stand essentially on this spectrum of sexuality, in my opinion. And like I said, I'm not trying to make everything just seem like it refers back to sex, but I think it's a fundamental way in which all of us actually interact with one another, but it's completely intuitive and subconscious.
No, I agree completely. And even you know, I've discovered that the relationship between a mother and a baby, even that is sexual. Even how it starts, you know, it's just crazy how it develops, and how it's completely a sexual relationship without having to do anything with sex, or with anything perverse, like you say. I also don't know how to quite grasp the idea yet, or how to explain it, but even with all the experiences that I have been through lately, you know, with having a vaginal birth, the breastfeeding, you know, like all these things that are connected between my body and my baby, and my sexuality and hers. And for me, that's been a crazy way to also realize that indeed we are sexual beings ever since our first day of life, ever since we're born, you know. And
well, these things kind of demand that you think of them in a more nuanced way. Whereas maybe before, you know, not having children, it is probably very easy to think of breasts and vagina and all these things. These are made for sex, but then all of a sudden you have a child. You give birth to them, and you're breastfeeding, and then it confronts you with the reality that there is something a lot bigger going on behind all this. Do you agree with that, or or can you add to that in any way? Because this is something that I'm even trying to figure out as well, as and trying to call attention to the fact that we need to see things in a more nuanced way. We need to see things in a more multidimensional way.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you know, everything is evolving, everything is changing. the world changes, the points of view change, the way we interact changes, like everything is constantly in change, and therefore we have to be too in order to remain, how do you say, updated, in order to not need in order to not be excluded from what's really going on, and from having a conscious way of looking at things more than a correct way. I don't really quite believe in that. I believe that it's more about being conscious about stuff more than being correct about stuff. So in order for us to be more conscious, I think we have to give it a lot of thought, and always be on top of things and trying to discover, how this changes and how does it affect me and how do I affect others, and like just constantly trying to flow with things. At the end of the day, I think is that is like being able to flow with how things develop and evolve, and
One of
yeah,
the, well, I was to say, when you talk about that consciousness and being conscious, what I think of in the way that I would say it, and I'm pretty sure it's how you are saying it, but I think of being present, being completely present in the moment. And one of the difficult life lessons that I learned, or it hit me a lot later in life, I'm sort of embarrassed how late it hit me, but the reality that happiness can only be found in the present. In the present moment is the only place that happiness can exist. And I think that's almost one of the importance. That's what meditation teaches us, is how to be present. And I think the meditative act can exist in everything that we do. It's just a call to being present. Yeah. And that's where I think you were kind of saying being conscious and having, to me, I almost think of it as just being very present and seeing things as they really are, as opposed to just trying to break things down into this black and white, which I think that's where sexuality gets lost a lot. Our brains like things we like to put these things in very black and white situations. And I think that we're actually hurting ourselves by doing that in all aspects of life. But I think getting down to our most fundamental parts of ourselves, which includes sexuality, I think especially as Americans, and I'm sure as you could see in Ecuador, when you eliminate that complexity, it's actually something that's painful.
Yeah, it is. It is quite painful. Most of all because, also a way that I see sexuality now that I think of it is, for me, sexuality is passion, I don't know if maybe it's like, I think that, yes, of course, it has a lot to do with my culture, but also a lot to do with the person I am. I'm very passionate in everything that I do. I always like to be passionate about things and do things for real, like do it like I really mean it and mean it. And for me, that has a lot to do with sexuality, because I think that sexuality needs to have this passion in order to remain sensitive and more, how do you say, more profound, more than just what we mentioned before, to be much more than just a sexual act, but to be like an actual, how do you say, an actual presence in yourself, if you may. I don't know if it's correct, the words that I'm using, but yeah, to be like an actual entity, almost like a real force of energy that's actually genuine, and that more than it obeys to social parameters, it obeys to how you feel, and you flow with it, and become kind of like entitled of it, and also it's kind of like a metamorphosis, like I kind of see it in this way. The sexual aspect is a lot of fire, a lot of passion, a lot of feeling, and
like a sensuality.
Like yeah. It's like when you do something just because you have to do it, like let's say you're in a job and they give you like this horrible task that you have to do, and you really hate it, but you do it anyway. You do it without this sexual presence, you do it without the sexual feel or without the sexual intention, because you're not feeling it. But when you really feel something and you do it because you really feel it, that's when I feel that the sexual aspect is activated. And this is why I go along with it always. As I told you, I'm a very sexual person because I mean what I do.
Do you know when you're connected to that? And is it something conscious where you know when you're connected to it and when you're not, especially in kind
No,
of the
not.
creative act? Or is it just kind of looking back and go, oh, I see that it wasn't there? And
Yeah, it's more like it's more like it's looking back. I mean, nowadays I could say that I am a little bit more aware of it than when I was younger because I understand it more, and of course I can also manage it uh, if I like. So in a sense, yes, I do manipulate it, but mostly it's there always looking back because it's just something that's deep inside of me, how I am, I was molded, how I am as a person. And I've had a lot of times that people would tell me that I'm like a very sexual person, that I have the sexual feel to myself. And it's true. And it's because of this that I tell you. But I do believe that sometimes that is quite misunderstood as well.
yeah, I've, and this may sound very bizarre to some people because it's not anything that I've consciously thought of myself, but there was actually a situation one time. It was basically, I got disinvited to a wedding, even though my wife was in the wedding party. And the reason that was given, and it would take a lot of explaining, I think too much explaining to really maybe give people a true
Yeah.
appreciation for this, but I think that they maybe can pick up on the absurdity of it to a degree. But I got disinvited to a wedding because I exuded too much of a sexual aura, and to them the marriage act was sacred, and they didn't want it to be tainted with my presence. And
Oh, wow.
I'm not making this up either. It kind of hurts my head to even think about it sometimes. It's just funny, but at the same time, people actually think that way. And so I guess I'm just telling that because I think maybe relate to you on some level in regards to that, like you said, you've been told you're too sexual, but I think that they mistake what the energy is.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree with that. And yeah, that's why also I had to, it came to a point in my life that I had to really kind of separate myself from a lot of people that were a part of my life and I considered to be important, but they didn't really understand me. They didn't really understand all this that I am talking to you about right now. And for me, it's just a very, very important part of me that if you don't quite grasp it, it's okay. But but if there's judgment to it, and if there's confusion to it, like as in that it turns in a negative aspect, it turns into a negative thing, then I find that the best thing you can do is really just walk away from that. And at some point, you will encounter people that actually do understand you and that actually understand your vibe and can flow with it and can be okay with it, and that's
Do
what
you,
I'm looking for now.
do you find, because there seems to be such a lack of understanding about what you do and maybe kind of your energy, do you find it difficult to actually really connect with people? And not that, because I know I've been around people and I like pretty much everyone that I meet, but
Mhm.
that doesn't mean I necessarily want to be around them all the time. Not because they're bad people or anything like that, but just because I know that for example, my photography and that all this that we're talking about is such a big part of my life, and that it's something that's people get very weirded out by, that I
Yeah.
know that they will be uncomfortable at a certain point and there will be a distance there. Do you ever run into that at all?
Yeah, for sure. I do. Well, I mean, like I said before, not here really, but in Ecuador, I used to run into that all the time.
And feeling
And
almost isolated because of it.
yeah, feeling isolated because of it, even feeling paranoid, because I didn't know really who was being actually genuinely nice to me and who was being hypocritical with me. Because I knew that most of the people that I spent time with and that I talked to and that came up to me and I hung out with were the same people that were judging me and and talking all the shit behind my back, and looking down on me for what I was doing. And I started entering kind of like this, like this paranoid state of really not believing anyone anymore, more than my little few close friends, which I really trusted. And I think that also limited me a lot for some time, because I was just all the time hanging out with the same few people, because I felt that they were the only people that I could really trust. So that also made me realize, okay, I need a new crowd. I need a new place to go to. I want to expand myself, because I felt like in a rut a little bit.
Yeah. There was a question that I had as you were in the middle of that, I'm hoping that I remember, but it completely escaped me there. But what then do you feel your work, what kind of statement do you feel that your work makes? Does that make maybe I can rephrase that. Do you hope that it has a bigger effect then? Is that a kind of a conscious effort for you in doing all this, or is it very much sort of just about a personal self-liberation, and that's sort of been the process? I would assume the reason why you put it out there is, like you said, you want to have a bigger impact. What ultimately do you want to see kind of happen?
Yeah, I mean, it did start as this very personal thing, which of course still is, and it's always going to be personal. But then at one point along the way, it also became like a message to other people. And nowadays, I would say that it's equally important to me in a personal level as in a social level and political level, even, if you like, like in a level that it actually speaks to other people, and that it makes other people feel and think and see and question. And
what I was going to ask before, and it ties into this as well. So you have kind of this personal statement and this kind of bigger statement that you're working towards, and you talk about kind of the isolation and stuff that you felt growing up. What were your parents' reactions to all this? Do they know this part of your life, or is this something that you just kind of keep separate? Are you able to kind of segregate it?
no, I would think actually this is something that I always dealt with. I always dealt myself, because they were in such a close-minded state all the time about these subjects, like because of their religion and their beliefs, that I always felt that if I would tell them what's happening, I would already kind of know what the answer was going to be, like I already know that it wasn't going to help me more. It was going to limit me even more and make me feel worse than I was already feeling. So I decided to act upon it just by myself, and I was always dealing with this by myself, which was very hard, but at the same time made me learn a lot and made me get to know myself, and made me understand a lot of things that it was even better, because I didn't have someone else molding my thoughts. It was myself. So it was a good.
Well, that takes a lot of persistence to do all of that, because being alone through all of this, did you have someone that was a support in any of this, that was really encouraging you, or that was part of this world that kind of brought you in? How did you not only get into nude art modeling and working with nudity in your own art, how did you get into this world? And after you got into it, how did you sustain it within all of that?
Well, I think I got into it through looking at a lot of art, at investigating a lot, watching movies, reading.
Was there anything in particular that stands out?
I remember actually this one experience, a very personal one, that it's not very personal, but it's a personal one, that when I was learning photography, that was before I went to the university. I had just finished high school, and I was very interested in taking some school from photography. And I remember that the first session that they organized in the school was with nudes. And it was my first time ever that I had encountered this, like like a nude person in front of me waiting to be, to be made into art. And for me, um, that was quite shocking, actually, not in a bad way, but in a very good way, because I had never seen that. And I felt even a little bit uncomfortable at first. I was like, kind of questioning myself, like, why do I feel uncomfortable with this if for me, it's such a natural thing. And then for me, it's just something that I've always wanted to do in a way, because I would always admire, these portraits, photography, like black and white, like, I don't know, maybe Man Ray, or, like
Did you
special, I
have
would say.
a favorite artist at that time that worked with nudity?
I really love Sally Mann.
Oh, yeah.
I feel that, it's very controversial, and it has caused a lot of impact in people. And I never understood really why, because for me, it was always such a beautiful thing, everything that she made, all the photography she made, and the kids and the nudity, and just like this homely feeling, like I don't know, it was, for me, it was so beautiful that that's when I started looking at it as in a very different perspective. Like nudity is home. Nudity, being nude, is being at home. And so for me, it started, whenever I would see artists that would make me kind of question nudity, and see it in a different way. Then I actually started doing it myself, and that allowed me to also look at it in a different way. And of course, along the way, I realized my family was not very interested in this, because when I would talk about it or bring it up, there would always be like a controversial feel to it, and like an opposing conversation to it, like, oh, you should respect your body, and people should respect their bodies enough, like, to not be naked and showing it to other people that don't deserve it, and like all these kind of very moral thoughts to it, which I didn't really like at all, of course, and I felt very misunderstood, and I felt even disappointed. I felt so disappointed that I was so excited about working on art related to this subject, and of showing it to the world and to knowing what people would think. And I was very disappointed to see that most people would just shame on it, and look down on it, and not even want it as a subject, not even look at it as an important fact. Like, I would never have my family come up to me and ask me about it, or be interested about it in any way. So I do feel that it came to a point that I stopped making art in a way. Like, before going to the university, I was in this very existential crisis of not understanding really if I wanted to study something art related, or if I should go for a more specific way.
Was that because of the negative feedback? Was that why you're questioning it?
Yeah, I do believe so, because for me it felt suddenly very lonely, and so misunderstood, that I was like, how am I don't know, how am I supposed to do this? Like, how am I supposed to do something important if I can't even talk about it in my own house?
What made you push through?
I think the love for it, the fact that it always made me feel so free, and so sincere about it, and that it actually made me feel like myself. I felt like myself when I was creating, and when I was having all these ideas in my mind. I felt like I was completely being myself. So that's what always kept me going, the fact that if in life you cannot be yourself, then what do you have? What are you living for? Who are you really? What's the purpose of your existence if you're just being a big lie, not only to the others but to yourself?
Do you remember the moment or the time when you decided to commit yourself to it? And I ask this because for myself, I remember it was when my wife and I were first married, and we're talking about, we got married in 2004. And so it was 2005. I remember saying out loud, and I was really nervous to say this to my wife, even though I had been shooting nudes and stuff like that for a little while, but I was nervous to tell her, because it was a bit of a revelation to myself that all I really wanted to commit my photography to was nude work. And I felt kind of a little embarrassed to say it out loud. Do you have a point of time when you remembered that you just kind of wanted to commit yourself to this?
I think in the university it became a more mature thing for me, and actually, in my university, even though it was in Quito and everything, I encountered a lot of teachers and professors and even classmates along the way that actually liked what I was doing, that liked the way that I thought about things, that liked my point of view, and that actually encouraged me to keep working on it and to keep going at it. And that's when I realized that. This can actually work. And that motivated me because I do feel that even if it's a very personal search, the art in general, when you have people in the way that actually, like what you're doing also, more than criticize it and judge it, that actually like it and encourage it, it gives you kind of like a desire to keep on exploring it because you can actually see that it's also talking or speaking positively to other people, which is was really my intention the whole time. What I really intended was to be positive about it, not to be such a downer on the subject. So yeah, I would say that in the university for me, it started to become finally like a more real thing because I also started to understand it better. I feel that I was also in a more mature level personally, like to be able to finally break apart from all of this bad timing that I had for quite some time during school and after.
So that's kind of where you found a lot of your support, was at university.
Yeah, completely. And actually, one teacher specifically, which is always going to be my favorite, I took like a gender theory with him, and I started learning about feminism, and I started learning about all the about gender and sexuality in such a different way, and what is the meaning of being queer? What does it represent to be queer? Like all these very, very important things that I had never heard about really in my life. I mean, I had heard about it, but I had never really looked so much into it in such a profound way as to really that it opened up a whole new world for me, a whole new door that I was completely ignoring. And
Do you have some examples from that time where you had a shift in mentality, where you thought one way, but then you had this professor in this class that taught you something completely different?
well, when he started teaching us about feminism, and I started, really looking into it because I became in love with it as soon as I started understanding it. And I felt that my work, what I had done so far with the modeling and my writing and like a lot of things that I had done in the past, I felt that it was connected to it somehow. I felt that the feminist aspect was very much always there, but I never really knew it. And that's when I started actually understanding way more, uh, really the effect of what I was doing and the weight of all of what I was doing. And I felt it suddenly as such an important thing, not for the world, but for myself. That it was actually, that it started as this experimentation, but that it actually became this very concrete thing. And then I started, looking into gender and all the possibilities that there is inside of it, and how society makes you think, that there's like a two-sided thing, like a binary thing, which when in reality it isn't, and that made me really question myself again, but in a very, very different way that I had never questioned myself. I mean, I kind of always understood that I liked both men and women, but this gender topic definitely goes beyond that, and made me question more of myself. Like why do I consider myself a woman? Am I a feminine woman? And does femininity make me a woman? Or, like just all these questions that are not very, they don't seem to be very normal nowadays because everything is so written down on stone.
What are some of the answers to those questions for you personally?
For me, it simply means that men and women both, we deserve the same rights. Of course, men and women, we have different way of beings. We function differently in some ways, and that's also what makes the world so diverse and rich. And it's perfect that it works this way. But it's just weird that women get treated differently in a social and in a political aspect. They get treated pretty much as like very objectified all the time, whereas to men they don't really get objectified, and they are taken seriously, and they have like all these rights that, well, nowadays of course there's been a whole evolution on that, like women actually uh, we are able to do more things than ever before, I would think so, in most parts of the world, not everywhere of course, but at the same time we're still very limited in a lot of things, like for example job wise, with the fact that we get paid less, with the fact that we get offered certain jobs and then certain jobs we don't, because those are our jobs for men, quote unquote. And yeah, I mean, I find all these things very, very, very like they cause a lot of chaos in my mind. Like I cannot completely understand it. And nowadays, it even has changed a lot more, because now with a daughter, I think also of her future. And I think that I don't want her encountering a lot of things that I have encountered because of sexism, Uh,
So, one of the things that I would like to get your opinion on or your view on, as someone who works with nudity and kind of exploring these different realms of sexuality, what is the difference to you between art, nudity in art, and pornography?
well, I think that pornography is very crude. I think that it shows. It is what it is. It is what it shows. It's just pretty much about the sexual aspect, about the sex, about the having sex.
When
Uh,
you say crude, are you speaking morally, or are you talking more about that's
no, no, I'm talking more in like the aesthetic.
okay?
Uh, like yeah, like it's very much like a crude, like a raw thing. And I mean, I actually haven't really explored a lot on pornography. I do know that there's actually some artistic pornography. I also know that pornography is not just this how do you say, this sexist industry that exploits women and that objectify women. I also know that there's actually more artistic porn and more feminist porn and like different kinds of porn. I haven't really looked so much into it to really know, more about it. But I
What is
feel that
that
if
line for you as someone who works with nudity? Where does the distinction come for you?
I mean, for me, I would think, I don't know, for example, in the photography that I've modeled for when I've been nude, I have never really thought of it as okay, I'm getting naked in front of the camera because I want people to feel pleasure from looking at me, or to feel or to look at me in a completely sexual way, like in a, you could even say, how can I put this word? Kind of like a piece of meat, like I haven't really been wanting to completely just put myself out there because of that. For me, it's been more of a content behind it. So I do feel that the mainstream porn, like generally speaking, it's basically for that, like if you want a good wank or whatever you call it, a good masturbation, and you don't have someone to do it with. You go online.
It's kind of utilitarian,
Yeah, it's
is it?
utilitarian, exactly. And I don't feel that if the stuff that I've made, the pictures that I've modeled for nude, I don't feel that it's been for that purpose solely. I feel that it's been for a lot of things. And
Are you offended if someone does look at it that way? Say
no,
lustfully
no,
or
no,
okay,
no,
because
because I feel that it's also a part of art is that anyone can look at it the way that they want it to. And if someone wants to look at it in a very sexual, very appealing, very like, okay, I'm gonna have a wank right now with this picture kind of way, it's okay. It's creating. So it's like
do you
you're
think that
feeling
maybe they're
something.
missing a point though, if that's all they can see?
If that's all they can see, yes, I would believe so. I would believe that they're missing the point. But I mean, if you really understand where it's going, and you can see it more as a personal research type of thing, as a statement, but then you also feel hot for it, then that's okay. But if you're just looking plainly as like objectifying it, then it can be an issue for me, which is something that honestly, yes, it has been an issue actually, because as well as I've had people, write to me and tell me, oh, I love what you do. I love how you empower others through your nudity. I also have people telling me like, oh, hot mama, you look amazing. You want to have sex, like treating me as if almost like I was a prostitute selling myself in social media.
Yeah, because unfortunately, they would see the fact that you put yourself out there being nude, that somehow that automatically equates to you want to sleep with everybody,
Exactly.
which the the logical conclusion yeah, there seems to be a bit of a logical leap in all of that. Not just seems to be, there is, but yeah, that's something that not too many men have to deal with if they engage in that kind of work for whatever reason. But yeah, it's a complex area to navigate, I'm sure, as a model and as someone who's engaging in work in that manner.
Yeah, it definitely is. Yeah, for example, I had someone the other day ask me, like, do you do you have sex with everyone that takes pictures of you? And I was like, no, actually, I don't have sex with anyone that takes pictures of me. Like that's not really that's not really the point. I mean, it's just funny how people just look at it this way that oh, you're naked in front of someone holding a camera, then of course after that you're gonna have sex, and it's just for me it's just very very absurd. Like why does the fact that I have no clothes on mean that I want to have sex with this person when like, it's really not about that.
Exactly, and I think that's one of the things that I really want to confront is there are a lot of misconceptions around the whole process of this, why people create with nudity, why people are involved in it to begin with. And I think it's important to know that what most people's perceptions are just not accurate. And
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people can see nudity in art and they can appreciate it in certain ways. The example that I like to use is the Sistine Chapel. So there's nudity in the Sistine Chapel, and that's a church. And I think that makes a pretty big statement too about the beauty and the value of the human body. But
Yeah, it's true.
besides all that, I think that people can very comfortably sit back and look at a painting. A photograph, I think, can be a bit more complicated, but let's take a painting, for example. Someone
Mhm.
who's very conservative can look at the Sistine Chapel or Michelangelo's David or something like that and go, well, isn't that beautiful? But they don't like to think about the process of how that was created. They don't like to
Mhm.
think that there was someone on the other end of that. There were models involved. There were human beings doing, being nude and in these situations. So the end product, a lot of people can see as being very beautiful and good, but the way to
Mhm.
get there, a lot of people think is very kind of dirty, and they would rather not think about any of that at all.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Which I think is something that I want to kind of draw attention to. And a lot of people, like we said, think of photography, a model and a photographer, and they have those questions. I think that's probably one of the most common questions is, so do you have sex afterwards, or how many people do you have sex with after? That is what it's all about.
Yeah.
And I think that it's not very common. I'm not saying it never happens, but I think it's probably more common that it doesn't happen, especially if people take it seriously and they're trying to create something.
I did encounter, people that contacted me to make photos because they were also interested in having sexual intercourse, and I mean, I don't want to completely, deny this person's legitimate, how do you say,
Like it
let's
could
say,
be sincerely artistic or something like that.
I mean, when they contacted me, it could be that sincerely they did want to make pictures, but I also felt that maybe sometimes it was just an excuse, a way of getting to me in order to have a sexual intercourse of some kind, like maybe thinking that because of the fact that I would be nude, this would turn me on or something, and
Yeah,
that,
that it's
that
like a trick to get you into bed.
exactly. And I do feel that I was in quite some situations like that a few times, and it made me very uncomfortable. And it also made me really question sometimes when someone would write me, like, oh, hey, let's make pictures. I would start questioning myself, like, I wonder if this person really wants to make pictures, or if he's just interested in having sex with me, or what's really the plan here. And I kind of started not judging, but like doubting others, and I started
Which is
also,
good. Yeah.
yeah, which is good. And I started turning down as well some people that would tell me that I would just not feel that it was right, and I would say, no, thank you, it's okay.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up. So how do you personally navigate that? Do you have sort of rules or anything, or is it just kind of go off that feeling and intuition?
Yeah, it's more like a feel. I also, of course, I look into the work. I see that it's something that I aesthetically pleases me. It's something that I like. It's something that it goes according to also my vision. And or if it's something, could also be something completely different to what I'm used to, and maybe it's interesting in a way. Definitely, the work says a lot for me, and also the way that they approach, the way that they write me, or the words they use, like for me is very much of a feel there, like if I feel that this sounds to me a little bit sketchy, then I don't do it.
It's very easy to have this idealism towards all of this, but there is kind of a dark side to all of it as well. And
Yeah.
it's those people who are the looking to take advantage of situations that kind of destroy it for people who are
Yeah, they
genuine.
do. Yes, completely. And they destroy it, and it's a shame, I mean, it's a shame because it's exactly what you're trying to turn away from. You're actually trying to make a statement that is completely the opposite of that. That says, hey, I can be naked, but that doesn't give you the right to sexualize me.
And I think
And
one of the things that it just makes me think of when we first met and we first shot, it basically takes away a situation like that where two people can connect and make something that they feel very passionate about, because as you've been talking about, it's the struggle and everything that you've gone through to get to where you are creatively as an expression, and the statements that you've made through your work. It's taken you a lot to get to that point, a lot of loneliness, a lot of hardships, a lot of isolation, and you continue to do it because of a passion that you have. And
yeah,
you keep pushing through. And I think that's something that I think is a testament to how you feel about it, and other people that have gone through a lot. And these are the kind of things that I hope people can understand, is how much people go through to actually try and accomplish these visions.
all these hardships and all these obstacles and all of these yeah, if you want to put it this way, like all of these judgmental that you have to go through is in a way a very very hard thing to deal with. So it can become like a negative in a way, but it's also very positive because I think that it makes you really push yourself, really question yourself even more so than what normally you would question. If you have people pointing the finger at you and criticizing you and questioning you, I feel that it also opens up doors to
to question yourself even more, and to mean it even more, and so I think that it can be both, of course, yeah, negative, but also very, very positive thing. So on one instance, it sucks that there's still people that think this way, and that there's always people that think this way, because I do think that it's something that, unfortunately, um, it's not like it's gonna ever change. I think that's more of a utopia we would be talking about.
Yeah.
But it would be nice if, with time, more people could evolve and could come to an understanding with this thought, with this way of being.
Well, you mentioned the word utopia. What does that look like to you?
I think my utopia would be, I guess, a world in which you can completely and 100 yourself, and feel completely okay about it, and not only in a personal way, but in a social aspect, and an aspect of, okay, I am part of the world, I am part of a society, I am part of something, and it actually makes me not want to run away, but it makes me want to stay, and it makes me want to be the best version of myself that there is, because I do feel sometimes, for me at least, when I come with these, when I come in contact with these obstacles and these hardships, sometimes I do feel like running away, like sometimes I do feel like saying, okay, fuck it, and just throwing everything out the window, because sometimes, I'm just exhausted. And
what keeps you going in those situations?
Well, now I would say, really, my daughter keeps me going, and also my wanting to keep on exploring, my wanting to keep on making a difference of some sort, making even if it's the smallest change, but leaving something behind. I find it that's what gives me reason to wake up in the morning, to know that, okay, if I'm here in the world and I leave something behind, doesn't even matter how small it is, but if I leave a little bit of a trace behind that someone can actually look, and it can take them somewhere new, and it can make them question, and it can have a little effect on someone, then I feel okay with existing, I feel like I have a purpose to it, and I think that's what also keeps me going mostly.
Do you feel that your work is properly represented? I look at what I do and I never feel it's good enough. But do you feel like your work is are you happy with where your work is?
This is a complex question, because I actually have the same as you. I never really feel 100% satisfied or 100% content with my work. I think that's mostly the struggle of every artist, really. that you don't feel like it's enough. And I also feel that it's because you can always evolve into something else. You'll also, if you're very much of a changing person, of an adaptable person, of a flexible person, which I consider myself to be. Every day I am constantly changing. Every day I am constantly exploring and understanding new things. And with these things, it's hard to kind of keep like a stability in the work that I make. So I feel that for me, my work is constantly changing. And of course, I feel that I am still very far away from what I really, really am looking for. And I feel that right now it's just child's play. Right now it's just exploring and playing, and seeing what the outcome. And sometimes I like it, and sometimes I don't. And but mostly also right now I do feel that I am kind of exploring in a completely new way, in a completely new road. And I'm very excited for what's to come. But at the same time, I also have a lot of anxiety about it, because I am not happy with where I am right now.
There's always seems to be a pressure that I feel, and it's not that someone told me this, but there's always this pressure that I have, feeling like I have to commit to one thing. And intellectually, I don't think that's accurate, but I still can't help but keep falling back into that.
I am quite amused right now, I'm quite impressed, because I actually feel exactly the same way like you feel, and not something that I find very common, because most people, they like, I feel like like to put themselves in like a group. So like I'm a filmmaker or I'm a photographer or, you know, but for me, that has never come off naturally.
Some more technical difficulties, and we were talking, though. I really wanted to hear what you have to say, because we were talking about sort of being, I guess, what would be referred to as a multidiscipline artist. You are in a similar situation where you kind of feel trapped by.
Yeah, I agree with you completely, because I've also always been very much of a multitasker. And as you said, and not because I am completely amazing at everything. In fact, there's a lot of things that I do that I feel I have no talent in, but I do them anyway, because I feel that it's a very interesting way of pushing myself, of exploring, of understanding myself, of understanding art in its different forms. And I think that's very important. And so yeah, I've also always been doing like all types of different things, and for me it has been kind of problematic, because I do, in a social way, I do feel that I feel behind sometimes, because I see some friends that I studied for example, cinema with, and I see them that they're completely dedicated to cinema and like making all these amazing productions.
It makes
and
you feel kind of guilty, right?
Makes me feel guilty, because I say, wow, really, if I would concentrate on one single thing, maybe I would get further with it, but since I'm always all around everywhere with all these new ideas, and like I want to do this, but tomorrow I want to do some ceramic, and the day after I want to paint, and the day after that I want to make a collage. Like I have all these different desires of doing different things, that I never really put my focus 100% on one single thing. And sometimes, yeah, I do feel curious what would happen if I would do, but at the same time, it doesn't come up naturally for me. Like I also don't want to force it. I also don't want to, because then it stops being fun if I do it out of obligation of, okay, I have to define myself as a certain kind of artist.
When we were in Ecuador, one of the things that you had was you had like a market that you started.
Yeah.
You're someone who thinks on a lot of different levels and wants to be creative on a lot of different scales. And that's something that I see in you, and I think I can kind of identify with that, and it's something that I appreciate.
Yeah, I think it's very nice to find other people that actually feel this way too, and that, feel that this is actually also another way of another form of being, another form of making art. Because I feel sometimes, people that want to really, they ask, oh, what kind of artist are you, or what do you make? And you kind of feel the obligation to respond to like this one single thing. And when you don't have that, you almost feel insecure about, really, can I really call myself an artist if I don't have this? Like that's actually a crisis that I've been through quite a lot, that I question myself, like, am I really an artist? Because I'm not really, it's not like I am completely talented in doing this one thing in an amazing way. Like more, I have a lot of different things that I'm making at the same time, which I'm not sure where they're going yet. But it's like a form of exploration. But I kind of, I question myself as an artist because of all this pressure that I feel sometimes. And I don't know. I mean, for me, it's kind of like an ego trip also, kind of like an ego kind of thing. Because for me, really, what's more important than the final result is the process, is the search itself. And I ask myself, once you become really, really good at something, let's say you start making paintings and they become like these really amazing, beautiful paintings. And once you become so good at it, what's really next? Like what is really the goal behind becoming amazing at one thing? Is it like an ego trip sort of thing? Is it because you want other people to see how really amazing you are, and you want to feel like you have success in a way, and in being an artist? Like, what does it really mean? And this is also something that I also question, because I don't know if I am interested in ever getting to that, in like being admired because of how good I am at something, rather than I think is more about the message that you're trying to give, more than how beautifully something is made. I mean, the only thing that causes kind of like a problematic thought about this is that when you're dealing with art, some people would say that there is a technicality to it. Sometimes when you're managing, let's say you're a filmmaker, it's very important that you actually know your tools and that you actually know how to use them so that you can be effective in communicating through film. So what I find when you experiment with a lot of new and different things is that you don't necessarily know very much your tools. It's not like you're an expert on it because it's your first time doing it and it's your first time experimenting with it. And that's kind of what makes me have a problematic thought about this multitasking with the arts. But what is really art and what isn't? And for me, that's something that actually I've been questioning myself this last week. What really is art, and who decides if it's art? Is it yourself or is it the people that are looking at it? Who really decides if that is art or not, and what really makes it art? And that's something that I've been questioning myself lately because it's very interesting how this changes forms along the way, along time, along history.
So what is next for you then?
Well, for me right now, I feel that personally I'm in a very complicated and new situation that I am living. I do feel that as in a way that I have been reborn. I felt that in the birth of my daughter, actually, that when she was born, I was actually born again as well, because for me, everything changed, and I feel that I am in this new world because, in a way I actually am. I am in this completely new place that I'm trying to get a grasp on. And so for me, for now, I would say a lot of exploring, a lot of investigating, a lot of playing, a lot of questioning as always, and new goals. I have set myself some goals, which is something that I didn't have before, actually. For me, the goal would be, okay, create just because. So art because I want to make art, basically. But now it's more than that. I have set some goals for myself, and I want to see how I can develop these goals along the years. So I have really like a long-term vision right now.
Do any of them involve, or are you still should say, are you still planning on using nudity and exploring sexuality in that manner, or are you kind of going off in a totally different direction?
I want to keep on going that as long as it flows. Whenever I feel that it's just not working anymore, for example, that I cannot find someone that can photograph me, or that I'm not completely, digging the idea anymore. I don't have a problem on drifting away from it in more so in the modeling kind of way, in the modeling for photography like that. I don't know if in any other types of form, maybe it'll come to evolution. Maybe I'll start exploring nudity in a different way. I think it's always going to be very much present because it's something, it's like very much a part of how I feel and how I see life. But I kind of want to go also in a very concrete way. I am looking down to maybe start making, clothing, which is something that I always found very interesting. The stylings also. I love it when I'm also modeling in clothing that also has like a statement kind of. So I kind of feel that I actually want to explore a little bit more of that, like kind of go in a different direction.
And then to wrap up, I want to just ask some kind of quick fire questions to you. What are some of the books that have impacted you the most, or that you're currently reading?
Oh, well, right now I'm reading actually Carlos Castañeda. That I've been reading that, and well, another book that changed my life. That's a very good question. I really love poetry books, actually. I have like a whole collection of poetry books. One of my favorite that really changed my life that I read like 2 years ago is Alejandra Pizarnik, and it's like she's a poet from Argentina that, well, she basically killed herself, and she was very emotional, very, very, very sensitive person, and very much connected to to her feelings and to death, and to, like, she has a very special way of looking at life, and I really love her poetry.
Something that we connected on, music. Well, what are some of your favorite bands?
Oh, that's a hard one. It's well, it's constantly changing, really.
Are there some mainstays in your repertoire that you kind of
I
always
mean,
go back to?
yes, I think Radiohead is probably my number one, along with
Yeah.
Pink Floyd. And
I'm seeing Radiohead this month.
oh my God, I am so jealous.
They're coming through. They're coming through Cincinnati, so I'm pretty psyched about that. So in a couple weeks.
Is it gonna be your first time seeing them?
No, it'll be my second time.
Oh, amazing! Oh, that's amazing. I really want to do it sometime in my life too.
Yeah, you have to.
It's in my bucket list for sure.
Yeah, they're a must.
Oh,
Especially, I mean, they're incredible. They're one of my absolute favorites. Always been a
yeah.
huge impact. So Radiohead, Pink Floyd.
I love the Doors as well. I love really the classics. I love them. You know, Jimi Hendrix. Like all these really iconic. Janis Joplin, of course. Well, I kind of very eclectic in music. I like a lot of different things. You remember that I
Yeah.
showed you this Peruvian, it's like a two-guy band, or like DJs really. Dengue Dengue Dengue.
Yeah, I remember we still listen to that.
Yeah, and they're amazing. They're like really, they've always been, ever since I heard them for the first time, they've always remained like one of my favorites ever. It's like a lot of
And I
psychedelic.
remember, this is a little fun fact. Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't you contact them to ask if you could use one of their songs in a project that you did?
Oh yes, I made a short film, a fiction, and yes, I asked them for because I performed actually. They went to Quito to play, and I performed before them with another band, and I was doing the dance. So after I did the dancing, when they were gonna come up on stage, I approached them and I asked them like, hey, I have this project and I think it would go amazing with your music, and is it okay if I use some songs? Do you give me the rights? And they said, yeah, of course. You can use whatever you want. And I told them I would send them, but I actually, I never sent them the project because I am such a perfectionist that I still
You didn't want to.
no, every time I look at this project, I'm like, no, this is not ready. I need to change this, and it's been changing, and I still don't know the end to it. I have like 3 alternative endings that I made, and I am very confused as to which one to use. And until that's not decided,
They're probably sitting at their computer still to this day, waiting for you to send that to them.
yeah, probably. And I am very ashamed that I haven't actually. I really need to get this this over with, because it's okay to be a perfectionist, like sometimes it's good because it really pushes me to the limit, but sometimes it's too much. I mean, I think sometimes it comes to actually accepting that what you made is never going to be perfect, but that's what's so beautiful about it, that you make and you create all the time, even knowing that it's never going to be completely 100% what you want or perfect, And
Yeah, learning to let go.
yeah,
That's
so
always a difficult point.
yeah, I think I have to start there actually.
So I have one last question for you, and it's kind of a tough question. So if you can't answer it, that's okay. But what is it that you feel you can contribute positively to the world that is unique to you?
For me, I kind of contribute, I would say, in being myself. So therefore, uh, really, maybe telling or showing people and telling them with how I am that it's okay to be yourself, and it's actually better to be yourself than to be someone that you're not. So whatever it is that you're feeling and that you think and that how you see things, you should really work on that, and really look into it, and I think you should use it, because I think as a tool, I think everyone is so unique in their own way that in a way, maybe this is why we're here, maybe this is why we're in one single space sharing with other people, because everyone can contribute in a way and that's unique. And what I think with the problem nowadays that we're having in the world in general, that we were talking about all these hardships that I went through, with the art, also you, and
that it's a common thing because of how people judge. I think this is because of fear, and fear basically of being yourself and of being honest. And if people would overcome that more, I think everything would be better. So basically, that's how I think I contribute, to just being myself and hoping that others would be too, and encouraging it.
You changed your Instagram handle recently.
Yeah.
What is your Instagram account now?
Right now is Reina del Aguacate, which means Queen of Avocados.
That's your Instagram handle. And then do you use email, or do you like when people get a hold of you through email, or do you like when people contact you through Instagram?
Yeah, I think it's better. Instagram is more instant, it's way faster and simple. So I like it better when I am contacted through there. And besides, really, like Facebook, I don't really use much anymore. I don't really like it. But the thing with Instagram is that I feel is very like, it's like me, but in of course, in a social media, it's like very much, it speaks a lot about who I am as a person and as a woman and as an individual.
So that's kind of where you put a lot of your energy to, as far as your social perception and how you connect with the public.
Yes, I feel that I have good feedback there. I have a lot of people that I talk to also, and people that think and see kind of the world in the same way. So we share ideas all the time. And the only thing that I hate about it is the censorship. It really pisses me off that you have to censor it, and the nipples and, all this shit.
Yeah, it gets a little tedious sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's always going to be a hurdle. But I just want to thank you for taking this time away from your beautiful family. I know it's probably getting late there too in Berlin, but thank you so much for talking to me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. It was such a lovely experience. I actually learned a lot more from myself and from you, which I really like. And I really hope that we can talk soon and say hi to Hannah and all the kids.
Absolutely. Thank you to everyone that has listened, and as this is a new project, we would love to hear your feedback, as well as any suggestions you might have. This could be in relation to how to make the show better, to guests that we could even interview, but you can contact me at grant@gtrimble.com. That's grant@gtrimble.com, or visit my website for show notes. That's gtrimble.com, and then click the podcast link. Don't forget to follow Maria on Instagram. That's at Reina del Aguacate, ReinADelagucate, as well as my Instagram, gtrimble_photo. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please let your loved ones know and show your support by clicking the subscribe button, as well as spreading the word. In a motion, grace that's